listeners, and thank you for tuning in for this week's episode.
Welcome to our special Pride Month edition of Pantsuits and Lawsuits. This June, as we all know, marks the 10-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's landmark decision in Obergefell legalizing same-sex marriage across the country.
And I will note, this is the gayest AG podcast in America, so it's really a good place to tune in for this.
I think that's, empirically true.
Yes, I would agree. And I would note that I feel bad leaving out our colleague from Hawaii, Ann Lopez, who wants to make sure to be included in at least one of these. Maybe we'll just put a picture of her in the background, possibly.
That's a good idea. We could do that. Yeah.
We should do that for Ann.
Flash that picture up there. Yeah. So, there are technically three of us. So, yes.
That we know of.
Fair point. And we I wish we did hang out with the Republicans more, that would be good, but we don't really know a lot about them since they don't join a lot of our lawsuits, do they? Unfortunately.
No, they don't, but that's unfortunately that's bad for the people of their states because we're crushing it and we're doing a lot of good work making sure that we're helping people in our respective states with those lawsuits.
That is very true. And you have done some important lawsuits in your past life, not just as Attorney General. And we're going to be talking about that today, Dana, especially as it relates to gay marriage. As we just mentioned, we're coming up here on the 10-year anniversary of Obergefell, but there was a lot of history prior to that in our states, and you were on the leading edge of that. I wish I could say I was, but when you were doing all that, I think I was a public utility commissioner. So I was a little more focused on energy law and water law than.
I remember it's all people could talk about during that time period.
Okay, fair enough. So, a lot has changed, obviously, in the last 10 years, and LGBTQ rights are no exception. But tell us a little bit about what was going on in Michigan, and how the law in this area evolved.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan was in a particularly bad place when it came to LGBTQ rights. Back when we first brought this lawsuit, which we filed, it was called DeBoer v. Snyder. We filed it in early 2012. And at that time in Michigan, we had no rights of any kind for the LGBTQ population. And it wasn't just that we had a marriage ban, which of course, like 35 states in the country had marriage bans, mostly from 2004, when, part of Karl Rove's strategy to reelect George W. Bush was to put all of these same-sex marriage bans into state constitutions. Even though most states already, it was statutorily banned. Yeah. Michigan was one of those states. And I remember very firmly being so disappointed when that passed in Michigan. But just double checking my parents' absentee ballot to make sure that they weren't accidentally voting to ban same-sex marriage in Michigan. But with that being the case, it passed in Michigan. And so in Michigan, it wasn't just not the right to marry, we also banned domestic partnerships.
Wow.
And because of the law on marriage, couples could not adopt children together who were unmarried, and that meant that any same-sex couples couldn't. And so you had this set of circumstances where, there were no protections of any kind whatsoever for same-sex couples and the children that they were raising together. And that was not the case for most other states. There was some mechanism in most states, almost every state but Michigan, to have at least some sort of legal rights to a child that you were raising, right, but not in the state of Michigan. And I had actually just lost a case in the state courts that dealt with a couple who were raising 3 children together, and they split up, and the non-biological parent got a PPO against the other parent, And, I was fighting that out under our custody laws and
Huh.
ultimately lost that case in the state courts. And unfortunately, my client never saw her three kids again after
Oh,
that. But
God.
it became more clear to me than ever how horrible that was, not just, of course, to a parent who was raising a child, but to a child who would lose their parent forever because one of their parents had no legal rights of any kind to them.
Mhm.
And it was setting the stage for that loss in 2010 in state court that April and Jane walked into my office shortly thereafter with their story that they will tell to us.
Yeah.
But as I often say, and this is sort of a recurring theme in the Democratic AG world, you can't win a case you never file.
Yeah.
And I, even though I was at the time just in a very small practice and certainly not part of some big LGBTQ or civil rights organization, all
Mhm.
of those organizations had turned down any sort of effort to challenge the ban on same sex marriage or the ban on adoption for same sex couples in Michigan because you may know Michigan is contained within the Sixth Circuit, which is not known to be historically a very
Right.
progressive
No.
circuit. And they did not ever want to bring a case through the Sixth. So what we saw as time went on, all these great cases that went through the First Circuit and the Second Circuit and the Ninth Circuit, and you had all kinds of rights that were, percolating up
Mhm.
for same-sex couples and their families in states throughout the country, but not here in Michigan. And I would get very upset and say, look, I know we're a flyover state, but it doesn't mean that the same-sex couples here don't deserve to have any rights. And
Yeah.
so finally, myself and a woman who also rented office space in the same office where I was in Detroit, we just decided, what the heck? What do we have to lose? We have zero rights in this state. We can't do like worse than zero. What's worse than zero? And there
Well,
were
it's really interesting to me. So how much direct pushback did you, well, as you made it clear that you were going to take this case and you were going to do this case, did you get direct pushback from organizations that were really worried about about the circuit, or did they just say, "Oh, well, we'll let her try, but she's not going to make it"?
the pushback we received was so significant. I would say that it was more time, effort, and energy to combat those groups, the groups that we all know about, and they still exist,
Yeah.
than it was filing the case against the government
Wow.
because we were battling it on two fronts.
Mhm.
They were so certain that we were going to lose in the Sixth Circuit, and as it turned out, they were right, but it's only because we lost in the Sixth Circuit after having our trial. We were only one of three trials, in history
Yeah.
in regard to the issue of marriage equality. The split in the circuit, as you know, is what causes a
Right.
case to then go to the United States Supreme Court. So all the Sixth Circuit cases, Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, all ended up being consolidated and going to the United States Supreme Court. The Ohio case was the Obergefell case.
Okay.
Our case, and I probably told you this story many times,
Yeah. Well,
initially it was called DeBoer v. Snyder. It was the Michigan case, and we filed
yes.
our petition 2 hours later than Ohio. So we got
Oh,
flipped in the caption. But if you read Obergefell v. Hodges, and
mhm.
just, for posterity's sake, I suggest everybody do that. It's really not about
Everybody
Jim
go read it.
Obergefell.
Read it tonight. Read it tonight.
It
Maybe
is
we could
about
post it. Let's post it, Dana.
it's about, let's do it. It's about
Okay.
April and Jane and their family. And that is what it's about. And we were the only ones. We had a trial transcript. Our judge made sure that we went to trial because he wanted to have a good factual record upon which to base his ruling.
Yeah.
It was a fascinating trial. It took place during the polar vortex of 2014. Uh,
Like
and
literally, there was a polar vortex.
That's right. During the
Wow.
polar vortex, we
Okay.
had witnesses that came in from California and Texas, and I remember them saying like, "Wow, it's really cold in Michigan." I'm like, "Well, it's not usually -40, but it is today." But because literally hell was freezing over. Uh, or
What year
something.
was the trial again? What year was the
20,
trial?
we tried the case in 2014,
Okay.
and then it went to the Supreme Court the following year,
Okay.
in April of 2015. So
Hmm.
we argued the case in April of 2015, and then at the one of the very last days of that term in late June of 2015 is when our decision came down. It was a 5-4 decision,
Yep.
but we won it. And
Where do you remember where you were when you first heard about it?
do I? We have lots of video of it. And in fact, maybe we can try and
Really?
overlay a videotape of the decision coming in because you can see it live. It's me and my co-counsel and April and Jane, and we're watching the SCOTUS blog on which we
Yeah.
had on the wall on a screen, and it was the very first decision that came in. And it was yeah, it was an amazing day. The other thing I will tell you about that day is that all of like a number of the local clerks just set up shop in this courtyard where we were receiving the case in, and you had couples that had been together for 40, 50, 60 years that got married that day, one after the next
Wow.
after the
That
next.
day.
That
That day.
day. Yeah.
Did you do the ceremonies for any of them or no?
No, I don't think I had applied for my ministerial authority to officiate marriages at that point, but I
Uh,
watched lots of the local mayors marrying long-suffering couples, and it was, I will say, to this day. I mean, I've been elected now twice, Attorney General, and I've had other interesting things happen in my time in my career. It was the best day of my life.
was it really?
Absolutely.
Wow, that's saying a lot.
Yeah. It was it
Uh,
was it was an incredible, I mean, to work on something so hard, but not just that, something that is so meaningful to so many people, so
yeah.
life-changing. And I would say this, and I know that there are people obviously that have different viewpoints on it. Something that to me was just so overpoweringly positive and
Hmm.
made people so happy and made people's lives so complete.
Hmm.
And I maintain, helped so many people but hurt no one. Um,
Literally. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I would imagine for you, yeah, you have it's on sort of two levels, right? On a personal level, this, cemented rights for both you and me and so many other people, but also as a lawyer, just as a lawyer, I mean, only not it. First of all, not every lawyer gets to try a case like that goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and then you win. Um, so that just got to be that it has to have been an extraordinary feeling.
it wasn't, and you know what, Chris, it's funny, but um, I know that people thought I was crazy, but I said from the very beginning, as soon as I met April and Jane, I'm telling you, they walked into my office, we discussed what concerns they had. I've brought to them this crazy idea of filing this federal lawsuit,
Yeah.
which they'll tell you about, and I know they had to think long and hard about whether they wanted to do it or not.
I was going to say, can I ask you, can I interrupt? Did you find them or did they find you?
They just walked into my office. They made an appointment. They had a near-death experience where they almost got ran off the road.
Wow.
And they wanted to try to formulate some legal protections for
Hmm.
their children if something were to happen to one or the other of them. And that's when I always had to break it to couples like April and Jane, like, I'm sorry, there's nothing that I can do to really help you because the court can totally disregard whatever your instructions are because you technically don't have any legal rights to these kids. And
Wow.
I brought this up to them, and I just that day I said to people, this case is going to go to the United States Supreme Court. And I don't know, I just knew that this was the case. And
How could you know that? Like, was that sort of a metaphysical sort of experience that you had, or on the merits? Like, how could you know that? Did you just
well,
something came over you and?
it was, first of all, they were the perfect couple in terms of their circumstances.
Hmm.
And they'll describe those to you, but
Yeah.
they were the perfect people. They were the perfect vehicle for the case. But
Hmm.
also, I mean, you had this unusual set of circumstances. Here, they were asked by the state of Michigan to take these abandoned and surrendered children into their homes to raise them because as
Mhm.
nurses, as NICU nurses, emergency room nurses with these special needs children, babies, infants, they were
Wow.
uniquely situated to raise these children. So for the
Hmm.
state of Michigan to say, we want you to raise these kids as foster kids, but now we're not going to let you adopt those kids that
Yeah,
candidly you love and you've raised them as your own, but no one else wants, but now we're not going to let you have legal rights to them. It was
right.
so plainly ridiculous on every level that I thought, there's no way I can't get a majority of justices on the Supreme Court, but just the general public to understand the absurdity in the law that would stop these wonderful people who, by the way, the state of Michigan, the Department of Attorney General stipulated that they were excellent parents, stipulated to it, did not contest that they were wonderful parents to their children.
That is an
So,
amazing case
yeah.
on the facts. Yes, I can see
So
it.
I just knew it, and I knew at least at that time that we had at least 5 votes on the Supreme Court, and I
Yeah,
knew that if we did a good enough job in the pleadings and in the arguments and in the claims and in presenting the evidence in court, I just knew that it's not just that the courts would be on our side, but the public would demand it.
interesting. Well, that is just fascinating. I can't wait to meet them here in a few minutes. But I mean, we had I guess, kind of a similar trajectory in Arizona, although with a few differences. I should mention our state's situation with regard to marriage, gay marriage. Like, so we had statutes that had been passed here back in 1996 banning uh, uh, gay marriage. And then and it's interesting because I guess it took an extra 4 years. You guys got your was it a constitutional ban in
Yes.
2004?
Well,
Ours
right.
didn't happen until 2008. So I'm not sure if they tried earlier or they just didn't get around to trying until
Like maybe
2008.
they just didn't get the signatures or something.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, um, and that passed, in 2008. Well, it defined marriage as between a man and a woman. A union of one man and one woman was the precise language. And then it was in 2014 that, in October of 2014, a federal judge, and there were several cases that were brought out here, probably similar to yours, um, and a federal judge declared our amendment unconstitutional. So, if, obviously that presents huge problems for us if Obergefell were to be overturned. Um,
Yeah, it's
you could,
still on the books, right?
yeah,
Never been repealed.
no, no,
And it's the same thing in most of the states. It's the same thing in Michigan.
yeah,
And, what with, of course, the Supreme Court that looks poised to potentially overturn Obergefell. And obviously, we've had Judge
yeah,
Thomas, in the Dobbs case specifically say, like, someone bring me a vehicle with which to overturn Obergefell, and not just Obergefell, of course, but Griswold v. Connecticut, the
yeah.
birth control case.
Birth control. I mean, all of these, substantive due process rights at risk here. I think that's really important. A couple things I think we should also note here, in addition to the fact that this is a fundamental right. But number one, we're not just talking about gay marriage. We're talking about other rights that people very much take for granted, like contraception and the ability to use contraception. And secondarily, I think it's important to note, the economic boon that marriage is for states. One study, the Williams Institute, stated that it boosted local economies by $3.8 billion with a B, and supported an estimated 45,000 jobs. I'm assuming that's a low ball figure, but
Well, and there's more to it than that. And this was part of our case that was so compelling is that same-sex couples were more likely to adopt from foster care than opposite-sex couples. And same-sex couples were more likely to take children that I hate to phrase it this way, but I guess were less desirable uh, in terms of having, physical
The
issues,
greater
health
challenges.
issues,
Yeah.
challenges, and they were more likely to take those children into their homes and to adopt them.
Hmm.
And as you know, the foster care system, I mean, it's enormously expensive to keep kids in foster care. Of course, it's preferential to have, people adopt them and for them not to be wards of the state anymore. And then those children, when they get adopted, their outcomes, they are so much better. They're going to have such a brighter future because they have permanent,
Yeah.
loving homes. So that was really a win-win and a big part of our case as well. And it also helped the stability of those families. So you have
Yeah.
families that were more likely to stay together
Mm-hmm.
in the event that you had a legal marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention all the benefits that come with marriage, of course, including things like, health insurance and many other things that we tie in society directly to a legal marriage. And
Mm-hmm.
it created better stability in those families and more stable families. Um, you know, that's just better for our communities, and it's better for the nation. And I will just say this personally because this is the story of April and Jane, but it's my story too. I met my wife working on this case. I met her
Did
at
you
a
really?
I met her at a local library. They were having a Democratic Club meeting, which I had never been to before. It was my
Oh,
very
wow.
first Dem Club meeting. And I was desperately, because we couldn't get funding to support the litigation, which had become very expensive, and it was hard for the attorneys ourselves to have to eat all those costs.
Yeah.
And so I started going to some different Dem clubs, including in my own hometown, where I didn't even know they had a Dem club. And my mother-in-law was the president of the Dem Club,
Hmm.
and I met her daughter, who began working on helping us raise money and then put together a nonprofit to subsidize the cost of the case.
Wow.
Then she started working on the case and became our project manager to put all the exhibits and everything together for trial and the
Mm-hmm.
PowerPoint and all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
We got engaged. I proposed to her on the steps of the Supreme Court following our argument. And then we
You're
got
kidding, really? Following your argument. Wow.
right after the arguments. And I said,
That's so romantic.
yes, if 5 of the 9 justices of this Supreme Court agree, will you be applicant number 2 on my application for a marriage license in the state of Michigan?
Oh my God.
Well, that was my proposal to her.
Literally, that was it?
That was it. It
Wow.
was very romantic.
Mhm.
She accepted.
In a weird sort of way, yeah. Uh-huh.
And uh and I just know for me personally how my life changed. And I will say this, I mean, as you know, we've both been single parents at
Yeah.
different times. Being
Hmm.
a single parent is hard. And I mean,
Yeah.
props to everyone out there who voluntarily wants to be a single parent. But
Yeah.
to tell people they have to be single parents, that be you cannot be part of a married couple legally raising kids together. What a horrible thing for your state to tell you that you're not allowed to have a legal relationship.
Yeah.
And I remember shortly after the case, when my wife and I were married, it's our, we're coming up in our 10-year anniversary too, just
Yeah. I
another
guess
couple
so,
more.
huh? Uh-huh.
But shortly thereafter, when she was able to adopt our children, I had a really big jury trial at the same time as one of our sons needed surgery.
Oh, wow.
And the feeling of being able to say, how about you take care of this? I got to go try this case. And I can't be there for the entirety of the time that our son is in the hospital, but
Uh,
now there's someone else who can, and I didn't lose my job.
mhm.
I could still have a job and have somebody be with our son in the hospital. And that sounds like not a very big deal, right? I mean,
Trust me, I know it's a big deal. Being the one amongst us who's not married and never has been and is a single mom, it's a very big deal.
but I
Yes.
just remember thinking, like, why would you put people in a position where they couldn't have this?
Yeah.
And the
Right.
fact that we were able to then, I raised my children then into adulthood,
Yeah.
having 2 legal parents, as you know, I mean, it, it's a really big deal when you can have another person there with legal
Yes.
rights who has the ability to make those decisions for your children and help in all the different ways. Um, it was so meaningful for me in my life for a million different reasons, and it changed everything about the dynamics of our family. And so I can say, like, I am a living, breathing example of how important it is that people have constitutional rights to things like the ability to have legal families.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, everybody, don't forget to catch Pantsuits and Lawsuits every other Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.